Hello to you two, and hello to everybody else. This is really exciting for me. My name is Isaac Eddy. Pronouns, let's see, we have a little bit of... my pronouns are he, him, his, and I am a theater professor here at Northern Vermont University, Johnson. And this is what we are calling a talkback about the project, which is the Listen Up project, a musical that we were involved in that was produced this past summer and now is an incredible film. We want to introduce everybody in this panel, and then we're going to show a few clips from this production, and then we're going to discuss it and get into all of the amazing themes that the show brings up and the process in which we are going to use this as a frame to engage students, high school students and college students in the future. So first, I would love to introduce everybody here, and then we will see some clips. So Hannah.
All right. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Hannah Miller. I use she, her pronouns. And I'm an education professor here at NVU Johnson. So that means I teach teachers how to be teachers. And that's what brings me to work with this project, because I think every teacher in Vermont and the world should see this production. So I'm excited to be here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you're here, Hannah. My name is Sarah Lowry. I go by Lowry, and I use she, her pronouns. I am a drama therapist and a mental health clinician at Centerpoint in South Burlington. And on this project, I was the co-director of the performance and also a clinical consultant that was supporting the process from the beginning through the end of the touring process.
Great. Then we also have via Zoom, we have two participants, two student ensemble members that were involved in the show. One of them is going to join us later, but Sydney, we have Sydney here right now. Sydney, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Sydney Singh. I go by she, they pronouns, and I was in the show. I was acting, filming, all that.
That's great. And where are you a student now, Sydney?
I'm a student at Castleton University.
Wonderful. And we also have Silas Brubaker, who is joining us in a few minutes.
Silas will be joining us at noon, and he can introduce himself, but he is a high school student in Brattleboro and was also a performer and ensemble member.
Great. So we would like to first give a little bit of a primer about what this project is, what it's comprised of, and how it came into being. Then we're going to show 4 clips from the show, totaling about 20 minutes. And after that, we have some questions that will be primarily geared towards Sydney and Silas, but then I hope to get some perspectives from you two as well. Listen Up was an original devised musical created to bring the voices of youth across the state of Vermont to the stage and to engage Vermont communities in conversation about the stories and messages young people need us to hear. Receiving funding from the Vermont Department of Health and Blue Cross Blue Shield, Listen Up was produced by Kingdom County Productions in partnership with Centerpoint, a Vermont-based adolescent and family counseling community clinic. The mission of Listen Up was to use theater as a vehicle for community health and activism, both for the groups of young people involved throughout, as well as for the audience members that attended. The script for Listen Up was based on 800 interviews with teenagers from across the state, conducted by the Kingdom County Productions team. The KCP team then led the script writing process. They worked with groups of teen writers and musicians to create the framework for the script, generate material, and write the songs. In the end, the script that was created was a collection of characters, scenes, and monologues that were written by teens themselves as well as by the adult leads. Also included were segments of the documentary material pulled directly from the original interviews, what came to be known as archival writing. And in some of the clips you'll see this archival writing, how we decided as directors to incorporate them is the ensemble would hold folders, blue folders, and that indicated that they were reading archival material from the original interviews. The show was rehearsed during the month of July 2021, utilizing the techniques of devised theater, a collaborative style that generates ideas from the group as a whole and flattens the hierarchical relationship between director and performer. This way, the teenage ensemble were given agency and voice so that they could join the 800 other voices represented in the show. We needed to listen to them too. They had a say in which roles they wanted to play, what lines that were not archival material sounded inauthentic, and which scenes needed rewriting. They also helped in the process of staging the show, choreography, and musical approach. We are proud that this project has a lot of Vermont State College involvement. Co-director Isaac Eddy teaches theater at NVU Johnson. Co-director Sarah Lowry teaches a course in theater for public health at NVU Johnson. And NVU Johnson Performing Arts alum Shawnee Stoddard is the show's choreographer. NVU Director of Theaters Tim Mikovits was the sound designer and engineer. A team of NVU Linden MBI students were audio technicians. And first-year theater student at Castleton, Sydney Singh, who is with us today, is one of the ensemble members. We're also happy to bring NVU Johnson's education professor Hannah Miller onto the team in post-production to help build high school curricula around the show to continue the conversation. So that is the show, and let's look at some clips.
Yeah, let's do it.
And Lowry, I think it's best to let's give a little bit of background before each clip.
Okay,
Does
great.
that sound right?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Great.
I'm tempted to talk a little bit about the process, but we can get into that a little bit later, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So this scene you're about to see, actually Silas, who will be joining us soon, is in this scene. And this scene was based on an archival interview of a couple, and one of the individuals in the couple transitioned during their relationship. And so this was based on this archival interview, and then the actors and the ensemble members shaped it, bringing their own experiences in to what you're about to see.
You think that just because I've never kissed, dated, held hands, and have no real desire to do any of these things in the near future, that I don't know what love is. In fact, I am a romantic, intrigued, perhaps obsessed with the idea of romance, the way it weaves through life in the darkest of places.
So the backstory is, it was my first year of wrestling, and the coach told me there was only one other girl on the team, because at the time I identified as a girl, and he said that I had to go ask her what her weight class was and if I could wrestle her. So I walked up, and I was really awkward about it. I was not smooth.
Yeah, he was like, hi, what weight are you?
Yeah, well, we ended up wrestling, and she kicked my butt. We were kind of friends at wrestling tournaments. We were hanging out, and I was crushing hard. Just so you know, if Destiny refers to me in the past tense as he, it's because even though I identified as a girl,
I just don't like to refer to you as a girl.
and I appreciate that.
So he asked me to his winter ball, and I said yes. We went, had a blast, and then he drove me home. He asked if he could kiss me, and I wasn't sure because I'd never kissed a girl before, but he said that if I felt comfortable, we could try it. So we kissed, and it didn't suck. We hung out more, kissed again, and it was kind of confusing for me.
She had otherwise identified as straight.
Yeah, and he kept asking, so what are we? And I'm like, we're just friends. We're friends who kiss.
And hold hands in the car.
And get in trouble for talking in cars until like 3 a.m.
Yeah, I definitely knew we were more than friends. But I had to help her through the process of figuring out her sexuality. And while she was doing that, I was figuring out my gender. So after many long nights of overthinking, I came to the conclusion that I'm a boy, which I kind of kept hidden because I didn't want to burden anyone, but eventually I came out and we had a conversation about it, and she was very understanding.
I mean, it didn't really change anything for me because I knew he was still the person I had fallen in love with. I did slip up occasionally because his friends and family were dead-naming him, and
I got kind of upset with my family because they didn't accept me immediately. It's not that they weren't trying, it's just my mom had a hard time with it. She was very attached to the idea that I was her little girl, and I just wanted her to know that I am not the daughter that she always made me out to be, but instead the son she was always meant to have. My dad I wasn't too worried about, though. I told him, and he said he kind of always knew.
He still struggles about how to advocate for himself sometimes, though.
I think it's important to understand you're not going to know everything.
I'm not going to know everything, even though I ask questions and listen and generally have a really good understanding about how you're feeling.
Only trans people are going to know what's going on. I can't tell you why my feelings change so often. I can't tell you why it makes me dysphoric to wear certain shirts. I can't explain why my brain and body are fighting. In public, Destiny is my #1 person. When people would misgender me when I first started transitioning, she would tell them off. I'm very, very thankful for Destiny. She's made me feel normal and valid in times when people were not the nicest.
I mean, he's my person, and he means the world to me, so I'd do anything for him.
It's so great to watch again.
It's so wonderful. Good. Yep.
And again, so Silas will be joining us shortly.
Yep, he'll be in here about 5 minutes, so.
Yeah, great. So this next section is there's archival material about sexual assault and how reports on sexual assault have been ignored in certain institutions. And then after that is a scene that was created by the ensemble themselves about talking to older generations about consent. Need to add anything else? Great.
He's really popular. A really popular dude, and he sexually assaulted me. And it got followed up on, and nothing happened. I think he got in-school suspension for 1 block, but I don't know. And he's been reported for 9 other things, and now he's the head of the track team. So when I go to report it, it's all, well, what were you wearing? Since when does what I'm wearing say, come touch me?
Don't teach us to cover up when you can teach guys to keep their dicks in their pants.
So I was thinking that after school...
Emily, what about your trick test?
I'm on it. What I wanted to tell you was I'm going to Ethan's after school.
Ethan who?
Ethan, my friend from the track team.
Your friend.
So, Ethan, you like this girl?
Her name's Emily.
Emily, all right. So you like her?
Yeah, I do.
But what?
But, it's too embarrassing.
You don't have to tell me then.
Like, how do I make a move? I mean it, Dad. How do I know she wants me to do something?
Oh, son, so you're more than friends.
Yeah, my friend, Mom.
When I was your age...
The covered wagons crossed the prairies, and all the girls were virgins and went to church 3 times a week.
No. But when I was your age, you had to learn a thing or two. Certain behaviors and looks can get you into trouble.
Looks?
You know, piercings, mini skirts, tube tops, anything that makes you look like a hoe.
Mom, please unsay hoe immediately. Besides, that makes no sense.
So, Dad, you remember, Cyrus and Katie, right?
Absolutely.
Well, they hooked up at a party, last week, but they were both drunk.
Oh, yeah, I remember those parties. I went to quite a few of those when I was your age, and girls can come on to you.
What does that mean, Dad?
Well, son.
Huh? Whoa.
All those short skirts and belly button rings. I mean, it almost seems as though they're asking for something.
Ew, Dad, what? No, Dad, that is so effed up. That is not consent.
Oh, big words, buddy boy.
You... Never mind, Dad.
Of course it makes sense. I got all sorts of flack from boys when I was your age, and with how I was dressed, I was asking for it.
No, Mom, it's not your fault. It's society that needs to change, not you.
Progress is slow, so I'm warning you now.
No. Clothes are not an invitation. Words are.
Well, son, when I was your age, dating, it was anything goes. So I really don't know what to tell you about this little girlfriend of yours.
Well, Dad, I'll just ask her how she feels, and I'll be willing to take a no for an answer.
A lot more complicated and rigmarole than when I was your age.
My God, Dad, it is not that complicated. It's the bare minimum.
All right, so we have Silas joined us as well. Silas, thank you so much for coming. Can we hear you?
Not yet.
Hopefully we'll be able to get audio from Silas soon. And if that is the case, I would love to watch this next clip and then
That's
bring it
perfect.
back to
Yep.
Sydney and Silas. All right, so what is this next clip, Lowry?
So the next clip is a combination. We're going to see one of the songs called Generation 1.5, sung by Naomi. And this song is it was something that the folks who did the interviewing heard a lot about, was about the experience of young people who are grown up in America and whose parents are from elsewhere. So this experience of being in between worlds, right? You'll hear her speak to this. And it moves into a conversation about the categories that young people get stuck in or placed in, or the boxes that get put on us in this world because of the systems that we live in. And this scene arose, a lot of the folks in the performance wrote their own monologues, and you'll see that here. And this arose from a lengthy conversation with the ensemble about that experience.
I'm sorry, I was just waiting for the church bells to stop reading.
My parents represent Generation 1.
Generation 1.
The start of my certainty since come undone. You see, they know who they are. What a blessing. Because me, I'm stuck in the middle.
Stuck in the middle.
Always kept guessing. I'm Generation 1.5. Been straddling this great divide. No one really knows how to describe me, so I struggle with how to define me. I'm Generation 1.5. Generation 1.5. American soil was not mine at birth.
Not mine.
But it was my sister's. See, my family came here in search of the same stuff we all do. Opportunity.
Opportunity.
Growth.
Growth.
But really, it's taken this toll on my self-worth because I go back to
Wherever you're from.
and they say you're American, right? I come back here, I'm still the other not quite black, not quite white, not quite right enough. And social justice, yeah, I want to join that fight, but I don't know if I can. Because I'm not black or brown, I'm a cinnamon tan and a far cry from white. I'm Generation 1.5, been straddling this great divide. No one really knows how to describe me, so I struggle with how to define me. I'm Generation 1.5, Generation 1.5. And maybe the middle is less of a straddle. Maybe the middle is more of a battle.
A battle.
Towards our collective desire to calm the rapidly swinging pendulum, set our passports on fire. I want to be met with a feeling of family from all corners of the world. Tell me who's gonna rise up for this little girl and say, you're welcome here.
You're welcome.
You matter.
You matter.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
And you can set down your backpack from wherever you've roamed. And no matter the soil, it's not the country who makes you. It's you who makes it home.
You are home.
I'm Generation 1.5, been straddling this great divide. No one really knows how to describe me, so I struggle with how to define me. I'm Generation 1.5, Generation 1.5.
Where do I belong?
Isn't it all about conforming? According to one survey, 80% of 12 to 14-year-olds said the most important thing for fitting in school was physical appearance, such as clothes and being attractive.
But what are we trying to conform to? These categories, boxes, and binaries were forced on us, not created by us.
The attempt to separate us out or ask us to choose any one group or really assume anything based on what you can see is a problem. Each of us has a different story, and these are our words.
What about people who are trying to fit their boxes? Enough is a key word for teens because none of us are. You're not smart enough unless you get straight A's. You're not old enough to have opinions. The adults are always right. You're not depressed enough to get help. I've seen you smile. I've never felt trans enough because I was such a girly little kid. But I know I'm a boy, and that should be enough because I am the only person who gets to decide where I fit and what role I play. Why am I not enough for you?
I've been pushed out of the places where I wish to be by the people in them. When I came out as bisexual, I faced homophobia from the people around me, and it drove me to seek out queer spaces where I thought I would be accepted, only to find that I was not queer enough for them. Even the most accepting and open of groups can become scary and unwelcoming when othering rather than acceptance becomes the priority.
One very unnecessary box I've always been uncomfortable with is my ethnicity. Yes, you can call me Indian, but I'm also half white. I'm also the nerdy eldest daughter of an immigrant from Trinidad who happens to be Indian. But that's not all I am. Stop assuming that it is. My last name does not encapsulate my entire identity.
As a disabled person, the most intimate part of my identity is always on display, and it's exhausting.
We can just pause there. That's an okay place to end as well.
Sure, yeah.
All right, so I would love to bring it back to Sydney for a moment.
Great.
Sydney, first of all, how does it feel to see the clips from the show again?
A little weird. Kind of like we took a time machine and it's like completely different time. It was only like last summer.
Yes, I know. I feel the same way, but I'm sure seeing yourself is different than me watching it again. How does it feel? One of the things that we have talked a lot about in terms of creating the show, but also in terms of kind of representing it in different formats now, is the concept of you playing yourself. It's like Naomi's line in the show, right? We're playing ourselves, we're also playing ourselves, playing ourselves. How was that for you, especially with that last clip that we saw that were your own words about being put into boxes, right? But you're also, while you're saying how you don't want to be put into boxes, you have to clearly define those boxes that you are trying to get out of, potentially, right? How was that process for you?
It was definitely very, growing up, I was always put into certain little boxes and stuff, and I always hated it. I don't like labels, I don't like boxes, they're not my thing. But doing that, it felt very weird to toe the line of, well, because there are plenty of things that I could have chosen from. But what part of my experience at the time, at that point, it was not so much now, which box was I most uncomfortable with? And going to school at a predominantly white and conservative high school, the most uncomfortable thing about my identity, the most uncomfortable box people tried to put me in was my ethnicity or my race or all of that. And it felt very weird to write about that because I've never had to write about my experiences in that regard before. Whenever I was on stage, I was playing a role, but it didn't feel like I was playing a role. It felt like what I do with my friends. When I'm upset and fed up, I felt like I was ranting.
I think, Sydney, that that overlap or that complexity that you're holding of saying your own story and then moving into acting a part out and then at some points being somewhere in the middle, right? Like I imagine that there were different parts of the process. Like, can you speak to the way it felt to be a performer and a human moving through those roles?
A little. It was uncomfortable at first. I got into theater because I really liked playing a role. I really liked the idea of going up there and playing a character or someone that I've never been before, and because I've always been someone, I always like to stay in the background. I always like to stay in the corner and not be hidden. But like the theater was really the one way for me to put myself out there without putting myself out there. And this show definitely sort of broke that down for me, because I was putting myself out there, and sometimes I was playing a character, but for once I wasn't really hiding behind a character. I couldn't hide behind a character, otherwise I wouldn't be playing it. I wouldn't be performing authentically or well at all. And it was something to get used to, because I don't like audiences getting to know me, but it was very something to get used to.
And I just want to say it's a huge act of generosity to bring yourself through in that way. So I think that was one of the amazing things that every ensemble member was holding through this process. I have Silas on the phone right now. Silas is doing an amazing thing of calling in his school cafeteria and having some trouble technically. So I don't know if it's going to work, but we're going to try it. And Silas, can you hear us? Okay, he can hear us, and I'm going to put him on speakerphone. And I wonder if, Silas, do you want to speak to anything that you just heard we've been talking about? We just got to see Dee and Destiny, and so we'd love to just hear from you. If Sydney was just talking about the speaking through a character, right? Like not hiding behind a character, but actually bringing herself forward. And I'm curious if you want to speak to any of that. Now I'm going to put you on speakerphone, and I'm just aware we may hear some background noise from the cafeteria, but that's okay. Just you speak up, Silas.
Yeah. Okay, can people hear me?
Yeah, you sound great.
It's perfect.
Okay, awesome. I'm behind the trash right now, so I
Thank you.
live a life of glamour, what can I say?
Thank you for setting the stage.
Yeah, I think it was definitely, I don't know, nerve-wracking, a very vulnerable thing to do, but also just there was a certain safety to it, because I feel like even if something did resonate really strongly with me, the audience didn't necessarily have to know that I wasn't acting, which I felt really good that I could kind of, in a way, hide behind. But it was a way that people who didn't know me personally didn't have to know if I was speaking like my own truth. But honestly, the more terrifying part is that people I did know personally, I knew they would know that it was me speaking, especially since we were instructed, or I guess it was suggested to us in the directing or the rehearsal process to make eye contact with people in the audience. And so making eye contact with people I knew while saying things that relate. I know Lowry and I have already had this conversation, but I will have it again anyway.
Yeah, that's
but
great.
Having saying things on stage that resonate with me and my relationship with other people in my life, and saying that while making eye contact with those people was not something you can really get anywhere else, because there's also this certain safety of knowing that they're not going to respond at the moment, they can't respond.
Right.
So it's just a time when you can say something you need to get off your chest, and they're not going to be able to get an immediate reaction.
Yeah, and that actually speaks to the power of here, I'm going to silence you for 1 second, Silas. It speaks to the power of theater as a stage, right? As a place for listening to voices that often don't get a chance to be heard, right? And in this case, I hear you, Silas, speaking to actually, they just had to watch and listen to what was important that I share and my performance. So I really appreciate you bringing that aspect in. I'm curious. I'm curious to hear about them speak to the devising process in this, right? What it was like for you, Sydney. Silas, can you hear when Sydney speaks as well? Oh, we lost him maybe. Okay, so Sydney, I would love to hear from you around, what was the devising process like for you? What was the value in being able to bring your own ideas and generate both in writing, right, in terms of writing your own stuff, and also in terms of blocking and giving us as directors feedback, right? You guys did a great job of being like, that doesn't work, no way, what about this, So I'd love to hear from you what that was like and how that impacted your experience of the show and the performance.
Well, for one, it wasn't my first time having like a say in how a script is. In the sense, I at my school, we did certain scripts where we changed the words and certain like events and stuff, and I always really liked finding out, basically, discovering just how creative I am. Because sometimes I forget that. Sometimes I'm a little I don't have a lot of faith in my creativity. But this is possibly the first time putting in my own experiences and words that were true to me, not just true to a character or anything, like my actual opinions about things, and that it felt nice. I'm used to not having a say in a lot of things, and I'm used to people just like hearing my opinion or brushing it off or being like, well, I don't agree with you, so we're not gonna talk about it at all. And so being able to actually discuss it and form the script that way was it gave me a sense of sort of confidence in a way, a confidence in myself and my skills and opinions.
Thank you for that, Sydney. And Silas, if you could hear that, I think you're back. Do you want to say anything? Do you want to add to that?
Sorry, it's very difficult to find a quiet place where adults will not yell at me. But
Isn't that what we're talking about? That's apropos. That's apropos. What we were just talking about is this. What does it mean to bring your own experiences to be able to rewrite and rework in the devising process?
Yeah, I think that was a really important part to me because I don't know. It wouldn't be our show if we hadn't rewritten it. It's like it wouldn't have as much of us in it because I don't know. We just would not have been as connected to the script if we hadn't rewritten it as we did, and I'm really glad that we did.
Do you have any? Yeah. Does anybody else have? I have so many questions, but I want to just also open it up.
Yeah, I think it would be a good time to talk about how what we're hoping to do with this piece now, right? So I should mention that Lowry and I are teaching a drama therapy course at the moment, and it is entirely inspired by our experience working with you, Sydney, and Silas, and the rest of the ensemble, primarily because we were focused on creating this show as a product to be consumed, right? To be experienced. And the initial idea was that the show was the show. But we, on the onset, decided that it can't be the show if we are not focused on the process as well. If we aren't listening to the ensemble and their own experiences as young people living in Vermont, then we are doing a huge disservice to the intent of the title of listening. And with that, we realized that the process of the devised process of bringing folks in and kind of in your words, Hannah, it's student-led pedagogy essentially. Of focusing on the process itself, on how to give agency to the students in the room. Not only does it bring up confidence and bring up voices, but it makes the end product better. And that's the part that a lot of people don't get, is Silas brought that up, is that the show itself was made better because of this hierarchical shift that we chose to do. It's not that we did that because we wanted to support young people. We did it because we wanted the show to be better.
Right. It's a combination of, absolutely. I think sometimes process and product are split or are seen as in opposition. And I think, it was crucial, right, that the young people be sharing leadership here because these are their stories, as Isaac is saying. So how could we possibly make casting decisions, blocking decisions, write that for them? And the show in so many layers, in so many ways, would have not been as strong. And I think Sydney and Silas, maybe you guys can have a perspective on this, but from the outside, it felt so clear that the parts that you wrote yourself were some of the strongest received by the audience, right? That was my perspective, and yeah.
And so I would love to hear from you two and from Hannah on so we have this film. What would be an ideal way to engage a classroom or engage a teacher in your life with this film or with an experience from this film? And in a simpler version of this is, what's the one thing that you hope that a teacher, a high school teacher, learns from this?
I hope that a teacher will take this and start a discussion, not just because in classrooms, since I've been in many of them, usually with things like this, the teacher shows it and then that's it. There's no discussion, and it's sort of just like, well, it's a fun movie day. You're doing an educational movie, answer some questions and stuff. But we'll actually, and I hope the students discuss it too, actually have some questions about it or concerns about it, and maybe even some complaints. I really hope that this starts a discussion within the classroom, within a school setting, because this is definitely a film where there are things that need to be discussed. There are things that need to be discussed.
Do you want to add to that, Silas?
I don't know. I find it really hard to pick one thing. Can you hear me all right, by the way?
Yep, you're great.
Okay. I find it really difficult to pick one thing, but I guess an overarching thing for me would be that immaturity doesn't equal helplessness or uselessness, and teenagers and young people do have power and deserve power and and deserve a say in all of the matters that we discussed, because I think every matter we discussed is really important, and so I find it difficult to just pick one that I want to focus on, but just in general, just listen to people more, I guess.
Totally, and maybe how we can do that in our classrooms. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder, because I always think about schools and teaching and classrooms, I know that schools have a lot of work to do and change needs to happen. And I think what's so powerful about this production is that it's demanding that change happen. And so I wonder, Sydney and Silas, can you talk a little bit about how this changed school for you? You all ended a year, a very bizarre year. You did this production in the summer, and then you all went back to school. How was school different for you, and how did this change school in your experience?
Yes, okay, you're on.
Okay, thanks. In my mind, I don't think school changed a lot, but I think I changed a lot, and therefore, my experience of school is very different, because, over the summer of, when we did listen up, I find myself caring a lot less what other people think of me, which is good when you're in high school, because everyone cares a lot, and I still do care a lot, but I don't know, I said so many very personal things to so many strangers who I'll never meet and who never met me before, and so I feel I don't care as much anymore, which is great. So school is different, after learning that things don't really matter as much as I think they do, because I don't know, being very vulnerable in front of people, and then having nothing terrible happen is maybe I can be vulnerable in other parts of my life and it will go well for me. So that's a good lesson to learn, I think.
Thank you.
How about you, Sydney? Did you have something to say?
Well, I was going to say that things changed for me a lot, considering I went from high school straight to college after this. Straight away after this, I went to college. But the one big difference I found as soon as I and I think Listen Up really helped me with that, is in high school, I was a bit of a human doormat. I was very much a people pleaser. I didn't like to upset people with my opinions or any sort of comments that I had inside my head. And I would always overthink the way that I said things because, oh, maybe I hurt this person's feelings, or maybe I made this person hurt me or hate me or anything like that. And second I got into college, I soon learned how to be more confident in putting down boundaries and letting people and telling people this is what I like and this is what I don't like. I don't like being treated like this. I don't like it when people ignore me in a conversation, and I don't like it when teachers treat me like a 5-year-old. And I really think Listen Up definitely helped with that. It made me a little less of a doormat, which is a refreshing change for me, especially now that I'm becoming an adult.
That's so refreshing. And, okay, so here's my second question about school, because I'm still so interested in school. So you just described ways that this changed your relationship with school in your individual life. What do you hope this production can help school in general see as possibility for change? So, like, how would you like schools to change as a result of this production that's in the world?
This might be, I'm not sure if it's controversial or not, but I'm hoping that this will give students, especially high school students, college students, of course, too, and students in general, give them the courage to have more of a voice. That when they see something wrong, they say something. Or when something's been done to them and they don't like it, or it violates their boundaries or their beliefs or anything, that they say something. Because one thing I know from my experience and from witnessing in high school in particular is students have a lot to complain about. they have a lot of not very complaints that can be brushed off, but also complaints that are very real and very they're very valid complaints. But they're so afraid to go up to an adult or some sort of authority figure and be like, here's where I have a concern, and here's what I want changed, or here's what I want to be looked at and paid attention to more. And they're afraid to do that because they're afraid of backlash. And I really hope that this has make students less afraid of that backlash.
Mm-hmm. Silas had to step out to go to his next class. So he's not here right now. I know. He says goodbye. Thanks so much. But I just want to say that, Sydney, what you just spoke to also to me comes back to the way that we create theater processes within the rehearsal room and how that impacts the folks involved and also in the performance, right? Sydney, I think you're speaking to both, well, correct me if this feels, if I'm not capturing it right, but you're expressing your opinions, you're hoping that folks feel more comfortable taking up space, right? Standing up for things they believe in. And that happened by virtue of being on a stage and witnessing folks do that, while at the same time it's happening. I remember many times within the rehearsal process, this was something that we worked on as an ensemble, like how do folks feel comfortable with touch, for example, in this scene? What are the ways that, this doesn't feel, what lines or what scenes do you want to be a part of? What do you not want to be a part of, right? Bringing that aspect of choice into the rehearsal process, I think is also an important value to hold as we continue to make theater processes to support young people in this way.
Yeah. And good curriculum, I think, honors that as well. Like, if we know that good teaching and good curriculum has to center our students' needs, our students' interests, our students' experiences. And what is so awesome in this production is that it helps educators see what those needs are and say, oh, I didn't think about that when I taught social studies last week, or I didn't think about that when I taught English last week. And if we could somehow figure out how to bring the spirit of this play and the ideas that we're putting into production and centering the student voices and letting that drive the direction. If we could bring that into curriculum as well. And I know there are a lot of amazing educators in Vermont working on that kind of work. But if this could help get more of that happening in schools, I think that would be amazing.
And one idea, just a very simple idea that we have is like you said, Sydney, to continue the conversation after seeing this film is to have a day-long workshop or a 2-week workshop or a 3, 4, 5-week intensive with some students that are involved in the production or one of the 3 of us or all 3 of us, in which we could create essentially our own listen-up response. And by asking the students that watch the production, asking them to bring their own words into some form of performance, or interview friends for some form of performance. And Sydney, I have a question for you about that. If you were to assign a mini listen up workshop with a group of high school students, what's the first question that you would ask them to grapple with?
I would ask them, how does the world affect you? How does issues in the world affect you? And I would ask that because a lot of high schoolers aren't asked that. They talk about how certain issues and certain things affect other people and how they affect the world as a general, but they never really get to talk about how something in the news or something that happened within the school affected them and how it made them feel and what they want to say about that.
That would be a great starting place.
Yes, it would. Well, I'm just thinking about like how so many of, this was Vermont specific, right? This was a play about teenagers in Vermont, and the cast was, the interviews were from all over the state. The cast were ensemble members from all over the state, and that a lot of universal issues are brought up in this film, in this performance, and also there are some really specific, like I imagine what that question, Sydney, like how does the world impact you? How does that show up in your particular school, right? How does that show up in your classroom? And it's interesting to think about the ways that this is universal and also very localized.
Mm-hmm. I would also love to take that question and turn it around and say, how are the youth of Vermont impacting the world? Like one of the most powerful scenes I loved every minute of this production, don't get me wrong, I cannot rank them in order, but the one that I went home just thinking about over and over again in my head when I saw it in Montpelier was the scene where the youth were teaching their parents about consent. And I loved that scene because it positioned the youth as such knowledgeable teachers, even in the inequitable power dynamic where we usually think of older people having more power because of their age, our parents, our teachers. And I would just love to think or ask this question, what can we take from the youth of Vermont that we can use to change Vermont,
Yeah, exactly. We heard from a bunch of parents about that scene specifically. And Sydney, you played such a great mom in that scene.
And you were part of the writing of that scene.
Yeah. It comes with being the oldest.
Yeah, how did that feel, writing that scene and performing that scene? And did you get any feedback from folks who saw the show?
So the way the scene started out was very, very different. Like when we first saw the scene in the script, it was very different, and we changed it a lot. To the point that when we got very close to the show, Sadie and I looked at it and we're like, this doesn't make sense. This is not portraying the point we want to portray. So we sat down and we changed the dialogue between the mom and the daughter a lot. And as we were changing it, I realized, not necessarily with my mom would never be that type of mom, but with older female members of my family that I haven't had these conversations, but I've heard similar sentiments from. And as we were rewriting the dialogue and as we were reworking all of that, I was like, this is exactly what I want to ask them. This is exactly what I want to say to them, that it's not their fault. And it's almost like it's something that younger people sometimes have to teach older people, because through older generations, especially with women are used to being to blame in situations of sexual assault or worse, and they're used to being to blame, even though if they're not the ones who, they didn't ask for it, they didn't do anything, they were existing and it happened. And as we get further in times and things start to advance, younger girls or female presenting people, they're like, that's not how it is. That's completely wrong. And as you were doing that scene, I'm like, I love this, because these are exactly the things that I want to say, but I'm so afraid to, because I don't want to offend anybody in the room.
Yeah. Did you get any feedback from folks who saw the scene?
I got some who saw the scene when we were doing the end scene. I'd have older women who'd come up to me and tell me that was very powerful, and that was something that they wish they heard when they were younger. And that made me a little sad. It made me a little sad, because I'm like, that's heartbreaking. No one's told you that before? When you were a young female, and people were like, people didn't tell you that? People didn't think to tell you that?
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Thank you for speaking to that, Sydney.
So I think we have a little bit more time, about 8 minutes or so. If we could see the last clip that we have here, I want to make sure that it is working first before I introduce it. That's great. Thank you so much, Jenna. So this last scene is it's the penultimate scene, and it is the 4 Black ensemble members are the only members who are on the stage. They literally take the stage for this moment, and this is a scene that did a lot of rewriting. We knew we wanted a moment in the show to give space to these stories and just have these stories on the stage. But it was incredible to look at how the story of being Black in Vermont has evolved so much over this period of time in which we have been working on this play, specifically with the murder of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, and the conversation in this predominantly white space about Black identities and Blackness has changed so much. And so we had, the original piece was written by a Black teenager about raising the Black Lives Matter flag at their high school. And by the time, and a year and a half later, when we were staging the piece and started rehearsing and discussing about how we wanted to stage this scene, we realized that it was antiquated, and it wasn't really representing these 4 performers the way that they wanted to be represented. And so we essentially, like multiple parts of the script, we threw the scene out the window when we started from scratch, and asked them essentially how they wanted to represent themselves and their stories in this moment. And it's an example of what we did for different parts of the production, where ourselves as white directors, we took ourselves out of this initial devising process and allowed them to have an affinity space where they kind of created it on their own, and then brought it to the rest of us.
That's right, and it was supported by our choreographer, Shani Stoddard, who is a Black Vermonter.
Yep.
And so the 5 of them created this together. But yeah, let's watch it.
Yeah.
Mocked. To be Black with dreams and ambitions is seen as a threat.
Love life. Like belly laugh. Laugh. He glares, stared at and mocked. To be black with dreams and ambitions is seen as a threat. Whiteness is uncomfortable when it does not see itself reflected. Black accomplishment has always been met with retaliation. I'm sitting in my history class. We're talking about cycles, struggles and events that are reintroduced at different time periods. The teacher asks if we can think of any examples. Someone says racism, how it keeps going and coming back again. You see, white supremacy is flexible, loves to dress up and hide. It isn't always burning crosses and white hoods. Here, it's the pages missing in our history books. It's in the curriculums for schools, and those who decided it chose the words donated and discovered in place of stolen. White supremacy turns heads to look at me, if only a glance. It's shocked when I actually have something to say. White supremacy tells me my point was well articulated with eyebrows still raised. It shadows the eyes of the boy who asked the question in the first place as he shrugs at my response. He knows I'm correct but won't admit it. He knows no one expects him to admit it. All of this, products of white supremacy. Yes, it's institutional. It's in our education, healthcare, banking, housing, policing, and criminal justice systems. Yes, it's systemic. It's policies like redlining, three-strike laws, stop and frisk, gerrymandering, voter suppression, and immigration law. If you don't know much about these policies, that too is white supremacy, because white supremacy instead blames me, tells me to work harder, reminds me others struggle too. But racism is not a mistake. It is not just ignorance. It was created to justify these systems. It feeds your implicit biases with narratives, teaches you to fear and be intimidated by me, that my only value is in what you can take from me. Do you even know how much you have taken from me? My ability to speak without fearing your discomfort. My perception of beauty. My individuality. My sense of belonging. My ability to feel soft and kind. Too many white men have taken from this body, afraid of spaces they cannot dominate and needing to prove otherwise. Too many white women think our experiences are the same, ask me to separate out my identities, have promised me sisterhood, only to take this body as an aesthetic and be praised for it. Appropriation doesn't stop at hair and clothes. It's woven into trends, internet culture, language, and slang. All this you have taken the humanity of black lives through gentrification, tokenization, and reinforcing stereotypes, have most literally taken black life, this country built on the repeated murder, rape, and violation of black bodies. And all I can think about is how quickly they're forgotten, gone. Their names and how quickly they're forgotten and gone. The systems that created them and how quickly they're forgotten, supposedly gone. To be anti-racist is not easy.
It is the commitment to disrupt systems. How willing are you to put your time, your dollars, your comfortability, and your safety on the line? This takes work. This takes sacrifice. Make racism expensive. Make it dangerous. Give it social consequences. Learn how to be a follower. This work is being led by the Black community, and it will continue to be, because something new is being built here outside of anything you've ever known. White supremacy teaches that you lose nothing from the voices it chokes out, but Black life has always been the backbone of social progress, even if white supremacy says otherwise. So let us celebrate Black women, Black natives, Black immigrants, Black Muslims, Black and disabled, Black and trans, Black and queer. Let us celebrate being Black. I'm so sick of a history that glorifies colonizers, liars, and thieves, that teaches that success means control and greed. I shouldn't have to be nice to get you to agree. To hell with respectability. I'm not here for you, but for prosperity. To bask in this Black, miraculous and holy. It's magic, fantastic. Bear witness to me, cause this is my reckoning. My body is defiant and it's wrestling. This skin is my birthright. The struggle is the same. My protest is to smile, despite all the pain. So I'll be happy, the way my mama taught me. And I'll keep fighting to undo these racist policies. And I'll believe in better things, even if it's naive. Cause this is Black excellence, it's what we need.
Wow. I keep on learning every single time I hear that.
Yeah.
I hear Faith's writing.
Yeah, that was an incredible scene and an incredible piece of writing that they did. And I'm just thinking about, I was just the words of the themes that we were talking about, how the performance and the process are connected, right? Like that monologue needed to be in the show exactly as how they wrote it. And how could that have lived if we had come in with an existing script and said, there's no changes to this script, right? So just like, thank God that piece was in there. And thank you to Faith and all of the young people that were involved for putting their work into that heart and heart.
All right, so we are getting close to wrapping up here, and I have a question for all of us, a closing thought. And that is this concept of devised theater or student-centered pedagogy, just giving agency to the students in the room, one for the better for better development for themselves, but also arguably for better teaching practices and for better art making. With that in mind, what's the kind of the one takeaway that you have from this project, from the Listen Up project? And Sydney, if you don't mind, I would like to start with you.
I'm probably going to be repeating myself here. The biggest takeaway is everyone has a voice, and if they should use it. Everyone has a voice, and they should use it.
Yes. Lowry, what about you?
I think my biggest takeaway is, how do I, as an adult within these spaces, back up enough, know when to back up to create enough space for young people to feel safe enough, supported enough to speak their truth, to bring their voice forward? And then when they do, how do we as adults know how to support that? How do we know how to respond? It's not just about creating this space, it's also about responding, right? And collaboration in that. So I'm thinking about my role in that and how important that for my own work as an adult and facilitator, how to continue growing that.
What about you, Hannah?
For me, I think it goes back to one of the lines Sydney read in the production, which was when she was playing the mom and said, or when they were playing the mom and said, "The change takes time." And then one of the responses was, "It's not that complicated." And I think the big takeaway for me is that what the youth are saying in this production is that these changes need to happen now. They're urgent and they're important. And I think I want to try to help myself and other Vermont educators embrace the urgency around all of the change that these youth are calling for in this play, because it's not that complicated unless we are the barriers to that. So I want to embrace the urgency.
Yes.
You're here.
I think for me, it's it's pretty simple. It's just trusting young folks, that giving that, just like you said, Cindy, giving them a space to have a voice means that they have a voice. And you have to, if you're going to create that space, you have to respond in kind, right? And it can't be a voice only for the ways in which you want to listen. It has to be a voice to say, to a platform for whatever needs to be said.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
This was really nice to kind of have the time to sit down and get into this a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to see what comes of it, including curriculum for high school students, but also it's continuing to affect how we are teaching here at MVU and teaching the performing arts, and kind of reorienting our ideas about the value of this kind of performance and theater for social change, theater for public health. So that is that. Sydney, thank you so much for calling in. It was really great to get your perspective.
Thank you, Sydney.
Thanks, Sydney.
All right, goodbye, everybody.